Hi, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name's Flynn. I'm here with the fantastic Bill Hope. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today. We'd also like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Bill, thank you for joining us for part two, or thank you for letting me join your stream, because you you ran everything so well without me when I was sick on Tuesday. So thanks so much for that. That was awesome.
Hey, no worries. I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better today.
Yeah, definitely not 100%, but like so much further away from where I was on Tuesday. So I'm happily over the hump, on the road to
Great.
recovery. Thanks to everybody in chat who is wishing me to get well. I think it helped. So the chat we're using today is at behance.net/live. I can see Sam, Johanna, Golden Rose in there. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to say hello, jump over to behance.net/live. Log in with your Adobe ID and we can say hello. You can ask questions as we're going, as Bill continues to show us his amazing work. So this is part two of the book illustration. If you missed last time, don't worry. Bill's going to be taking us through a whole nother page, and we'll be talking and covering, and we'll be answering a lot of questions that pop up. So please do throw them in chat. How about I get some music going? But yeah, Bill, should we just jump in?
Sure. Maybe I'll just quickly introduce the concept of the books.
Perfect.
And what we're doing today,
Good idea.
just for anybody who missed the Tuesday stream. So I'll just quickly show you. So I've been working for the past about a year and a half on a series of books for Scholastic here in Australia. And they're these books here, and they're sort of what they call seek and find books. So we've got one which is Where's Santa's Elf, and one called Where's the Golden Egg? And they're these kind of books where you've got these big, complicated scenes with lots of little things hidden inside the picture that you can find, and there's a story to go along with them. So it's this series of children's books that I've been doing, which has been really fun to work on. And I'm working on a new one today. So it's the sequel to Where's Santa's Elf? It's going to be Where's Santa's Elf Around the World? And it's been a really exciting new sort of avenue for my work. And last session we were looking at one sort of largely finished picture that I'd done for this new book. And today I'm going to start working on a new one that's probably about 50% done. So I'll show you something that's a little bit more sort of halfway through. So Flynn, do you want to switch to my screen and we'll get going?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. Hopefully you can see what I'm looking at. So this is a page that I'm working on right now for this book. So the theme for this one's around the world. So we've got all these different cities. I might quickly show you what we were doing yesterday. So yesterday was this place in England called Knaresborough. So we had this sort of exciting, very British scene. And today we're moved over to Japan. So we're doing a place called Shibuya Crossing, or what I learnt yesterday is actually called Shibuya Scramble Crossing, which is this big crossroads in Tokyo, which is kind of seen as this kind of hub of culture. Apparently it's a very fashionable part of the city. I've never been. Flynn, you've been to this place in reality before, haven't you?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go a long time. I don't want to think about how long ago it was and how old I am, but yeah, it was a while ago. I went with my sister. We traveled around Tokyo and then Shibuya and other parts of Japan before we went skiing. Feels like a long time ago, but yeah, it was a fantastic trip. It was like the last family trip where I was like, my mum paid for everything. It's not something that I think I could ever afford, but it was amazing. And
it is a bit amazing, those family trips where you think back now about how you were like, oh, I had to get dragged to this place by my parents, and then you think about it as an adult and you're like, oh, free international travel and everything paid for.
So lucky.
I could do that again.
Such a privilege. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can see with this image, there's all sorts of stuff going on. And I've just started coloring in these sections. So most of the picture right now, what you see, I've just got this sort of neutral sort of block color in the background, and I'm just sort of starting to fill in the color of this scene. So if I bring up my tools, what I thought we could do today is a big part of these books is hiding things for kids to find in books. And it's kind of interesting sort of figuring out what kind of items you're going to hide and how you're going to hide them. So I thought we'd sort of finish off a few items to go into this picture, and then I'll talk through a little bit of the process of how I go about hiding them away. Yeah, and then on the second half of the stream, on Tuesday, we were doing a bit of pattern making for the book. It was going to be something that sat inside the cover, this sort of Christmassy pattern, and we'll do a little bit more of that later in the stream.
That was amazing to watch.
Cool. It's really fun. It's a new feature from Photoshop 2021 that makes pattern making really streamlined and easy, and it's visually just really cool as well. So what I might do is I've got this folder of items that I've drawn that I'm going to be dropping into this picture, and I might just do what I did last time and put a just kind of a blanket white layer down so we can see what we're working on. So I've got a bunch of different things that I'm going to hide. I've got a drone, I've got a sort of little gaming device, I've got some trash cans, I've got a fan, I've got a Christmas wreath, I've got some cheerful mice, I've got this thing, which I'm not quite sure what it is, I've got some Christmas crackers, and all of these things I'm going to hide throughout the picture.
I love the salaryman mouse, the one down the right.
Oh yes, yeah. We've got to make a living somehow. So yeah, I think I'll just color in these Christmas crackers, and then we'll get to hiding them. So with these ones, I've got a palette that I've made for I'm in Photoshop 2021. So I've got a standard palette that I use for these, but now I'll just do a little bit of winging it. So I'm just going to use the paint bucket tool and start dropping some color into these. I might have one that's bluey color with some yellow maybe. And it's good to try and find some colors that will match the existing colors in the scene. And then this gives you a little bit more sort of hiding potential. Because the whole name of the game with these is to sort of confuse the eye and have something visible but sort of hiding in plain sight. So I know I've got some of these colors appearing already in the scene. So just going to add those colors, and now I'm just going to do a little bit of basic shading onto this. So I'm just going to get a slightly softer brush tool and start doing a little bit of basic shading. If anybody's got any questions about sort of children's books illustration or what I'm doing specifically today or anything like that, feel free to drop it in the chat and I'll do what I can to answer. I was saying last time I largely work as a commercial illustrator, so I do lots of drawing in advertising and for business and things like that. And I think when I was at university, I want my goal was to become a children's book illustrator. That's what I really wanted. And then I sort of discovered all these other kinds of illustration that I could do for work. And now I've been lucky enough to sort of circle back to children's book illustration. So there's lots of people, I think, that go into illustration just thinking children's books is kind of the gold standard of what you can do. And it's really fun, but it's not sort of the be all and end all. There's lots of other stuff that you can do.
That's interesting. But so did you make any particular steps to get into book illustration, or because you found all these other like commercial outputs, we'll say, or like mediums for your work?
Yeah.
Was it serendipity? Like, did it just kind of come along? I think I remember you said Scholastic reach out to you. So yeah, was it because you just kind of let it go? It came to you, or what was your strategy around that?
Yeah, it was funny. Like when I first started out, I'd make these, now that I think about them, incredibly pretentious portfolios that I'd send around to publishers that sort of said, hey folks, I've arrived, sort of deal with it, hire me straight away kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that a lot of people right out of art school might fall into.
Oh, and design school for sure. Everybody,
yes.
I think, has a commercial portfolio story.
Yeah, I was absolutely not ready, but I was kind of just throwing myself in the deep end, and nothing came out of those. I did a couple of very low-key children's books. But yeah, it was kind of serendipitous. I had sort of been making some drawings in this kind of like crowd drawing style for my own enjoyment, and I ended up sending one to Scholastic at just I kind of pitched it to them, and I just really got lucky. I got in at the right time when they were looking for an illustrator to do work like that. So in a sense, it was, I'm going to say, half luck and half that I'd reached a point of maturity where I guess it was that kind of like luck meets preparation thing. Like,
Right.
I was lucky in my timing, but once they sort of asked me to work on it, I was kind of good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think timing is key. You never know what's happening on the other side of the email address that you're sending to, or the the job you're looking for, or anything. Sometimes I think timing plays a really important part in getting that work and getting your foot in the door, or getting that one project that leads to a domino effect of lots of projects.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just explain what I'm doing right now. So I've duplicated my 3 Christmas crackers, so I've got 9 Christmas crackers now. I try and not duplicate too much in these drawings, but it's inevitable that if you're trying to create this much volume, being able to do a little bit of duplication, and you can rotate things and flip them and sort of give the sense of originality to things as much as possible. But I've got 9 Christmas crackers, so down here I've just copied the objects from a previous picture. So obviously I don't have 9 thongs or water bottles or frogs in this picture. So I'm just going to replace that with Christmas.
So thongs are flip-flops in this sense?
Yes.
So is this going to an American audience? The book?
I don't think this book is... I think this book is just sold in the UK and Australia right now.
Yeah.
But if it was going to the American market, I assume, yes, it would be changed to flip-flops. Yeah. Might not be the right material. So I've got my 9 Christmas crackers here, so I'm just going to start finding places to hide them away. I haven't fully colored this picture, but so I can't sort of do as much color checking as I'd like. But a big thing that I do is try and hide them close to colors that are similar. So I've got a bit of red here. From this item behind the tree, so I'm going to put the red one there. And it's kind of this almost like sleight of hand approach where you're trying to sort of make something not immediately obvious about where it's going to be. So I might put one down just behind the leg of this robot here. So you can see I'm just putting them on top of everything, but I'm going to go back and mask them over time. And that'll help me sort of situate them a little bit easier. So I'll have one down here in the car. Might hide one. I know I've got this bunch of birds having a little bird conference in a tree over here, so I might stick one inside the bird nest. Let's grab another one. Maybe one just down behind the car here. So you want them to be big enough that you can see them from quite a distance. So they might not be entirely proportional with reality, but it should work fine. That's going to blend in nicely with that guy there.
Nice.
One thing I'm avoiding when I'm doing this is in the center of the image, you can see I've got these guidelines that I've set up. So these are my, this is going to be a double page spread. So this line in the middle here is where the center of the book will be. And it's what they call in publishing the gutter. And they call it the gutter because it's kind of like, if you imagine the pages going in, they're going to be bound in the center of that page there. So you kind of don't want anything important to be on that central line because it's going to get lost. So I'm going to make sure I don't hide anything in that gutter in the middle. Okay, now let's just put our last one down here. And often you can confuse the eye with color, but also with interesting things going on. So in this section, I've got these, I don't know, I had this idea about like there was a green crosswalk guy and there were just green two-dimensional people crossing the crosswalk. I don't know. with pictures like this, you've got you're trying to sort of like hide visual jokes in there, but there's so much content to cover. Your standard for what counts as a hilarious visual joke sort of lowers down a little bit.
It can be subjective for sure.
Yeah,
I loved in the other book, it was the rap battle, and there was all that, there was like quite an ongoing theme in the WRAP battle version of it, which is great.
Yes. Yeah. So what I've done is, it took me a while to realize this, that you can mask folders as well. So instead of just masking an individual layer, you can mask a whole folder. And with all my hidden items, I'm going to make a mask that goes over the whole folder so I can hide sections of them. And the reason I'm not just erasing sections of that Christmas cracker, but I'm masking it, is that so I can move it around and tweak it, and I'm not losing sort of visual information by erasing something there. So I'm going to select all the figures in the scene. So you can see I've got the walking ants selection around all those figures. And now I can paint into my mask layer, and I'm just going to erase that part of the cracker. So I'll take away from all the sections I need to.
Nice.
And now you can see that cracker is kind of nicely just hidden in there. So actually, I'm struggling to see where I put the crackers, so I'm just going to put a whitish layer underneath so I can clearly see what I'm working on now. So just erasing that bit behind the taxi, this one behind those cones there, behind the car. You can see I still want part of it to sit in front of the other images, but part of it's got to go. So this really speeds up that process of just hiding things away. Just erase that one there. Now there's some of them I need to take a slightly more custom approach to how I'm masking them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the layer itself transparent so I can see what's underneath it, and then I'll just carefully paint the bits I want to remove away from that one. And yeah, it should give us a nice clean finish. And then just got to erase the bird bath one, and then I think we're good to go.
That's cool. Have you ever had any, like, when you first presented this, like, what level of challenge do you need to go for? Like, have you presented this back to Scholastic and they're like, all right, we've passed this around the team and no one can find the seventh, present or something like that? Or is this just something that you've decided and there's no like back and forth?
Oh no, there's definitely back and forth. My editor thankfully has young kids who kind of work as her sub-editors who look through my pictures. Perfect. And make sure things are properly hidden. So they are sort of tested with an audience before it goes out. And there is quite a lot of back and forth with making sure that you've got the right amount of things hidden and you haven't sort of accidentally duplicated things. It is quite tricky because you've got so many objects to keep an eye on. I actually, once I've finished the book, I make a series of cheat sheets showing where everything's hidden, just to help out my editors with that as well. Because there was a bit of a controversy with the first book where there were meant to be 9 hidden cogs in a page. And there technically were 9 hidden cogs, but one of them was sort of on the side section as opposed to actually in the image. So lots of people thought there were 8 cogs. Like, you definitely get feedback on this. So it's,
right.
It's something that requires quite a lot of focus to get right.
Yeah.
So you can't really see them looking at the whole picture, but if I click that on and off, you can see all my hidden Christmas crackers now.
Nice.
So it's quite a long process because I've done 9 of those, but now I've got to do 10 and something else on 8 and 7 and 6 and 5. I think there's about 550 hidden items in each book, so it's quite a process.
Wow,
of
that is
of
a lot.
building those up. Yeah. Okay, so while we're still on this one, unless there's any questions, what I might do is add in one of the custom hidden characters into this book. Yeah, so one of my favorite characters from the book is a gingerbread man called Old Hasty Tasty. And I'll just go into my libraries and pull up an image of Old Hasty Tasty. All right.
Oh, this looks familiar.
So, yeah. So these are the characters from the first book, and I just have those as sort of a reference. Rasterize that. So this is the character, Old Tasty Tasty. He's a gingerbread man who's constantly on the run in case someone were to try and eat him. And I could just drop him into the scene, but it'd be nice to have an original take on Old Tasty Tasty. So I'm going to start drawing him in here.
It's a very cool,
and then we'll
very
color
cool
him
name.
into the scene. Yeah.
So
it was one of those ones that.
Go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to move on to another thing, so you go on.
Oh, I was just saying he was one of those characters that I thought might be too silly to pass the editors, but thankfully they were into him.
He's cool. So. I like it a lot. I was going to ask around. I really enjoyed in your last session you were talking about how you were creating this. You're creating what you thought was like this kind of in your head kind of English town, and then you showed someone from England that said, "Oh, that's that looks exactly like this place," and then it became that place. So that's like a really cool, interesting story. For this one, Shibuya is obviously a real place. So, are you doing a ton of research into it? Are you trying to figure out like what about the place and try to bring those aspects in before you even start, or because obviously you have the robot there, you have the Japanese writing down the side in neon and all that sort of thing. At what point do you start like bringing in research and writing a list of things you want to include, or is it all very free flowing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's been one of my favorite bits and probably the most challenging bit of doing this job in particular. Because obviously I haven't traveled to every place that I'm drawing. I've tried to include at least half of them that I know with some degree a little bit about, so it's informed. I mean, in some ways, like it's a children's book and it's not a guidebook, so
right.
Like for me, the pictures to be interesting and fun for kids has always got to be the most important thing. You want to draw something that is, you want something that the people who live in these places would be happy with the representation.
Right.
But in a sense, it's more important for me that it's just a fun picture that kids will like. So with Shibuya Crossing, it's not geographically exactly correct. Like there's actually 5 streets meeting instead of 4 streets, and I haven't included all the exact buildings. I've sort of gone for something that you hope is sort of tonally correct rather than geographically correct. Yeah, but I mean, I've loved doing the research. I mean, mostly it's been sort of through Google Maps and image searches and watching video blogs of people walking around these places, and that's been really fun doing that research for the book. I listened to an interview with the illustrator that did the Eloise books. Do you know those ones, Flynn?
Eloise books? No, I don't think so.
Okay, they're it's a illustrator I think called Kay Thompson, or maybe that was the writer. But they were sort of a classic American children's book that came out I think in maybe the 70s or the 60s. And he was sent by his publisher to Paris for 4 months just to sort of soak in the atmosphere before he started doing this book about a kid in Paris. And unfortunately, those Scholastic have been fantastic. They did not send me to every location for
yeah,
time.
That sounds extravagant.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of imagination that goes into it. Yeah, so it's a bit of both, really. But luckily, I've got a very kind friend who grew up in. She's Japanese, who's been helping me sort of. She did the translation for the neon signs, and I've got a few more translations that I've got to include just to make sure I get those things correct. And also, it's just once I've finished the picture, I'll send it on to her. It's just kind of a sense check of like, is there anything that I've messed up here by accident, or I hope I haven't done anything that could be offensive to anyone. So I'll double check those things to make sure it's all kind of above board, because I don't know, you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, you don't want to sort of put your foot in any issues.
Yeah, for sure.
With those things. Yeah.
And so just going back to the work, like this is really interesting, like the way that you've done this. So rather than just popping in old Hasty Tasty in, you've done a different version of him.
Yep.
But because you've just thrown it in from your libraries, you're just color picking the color palette from there. You can use it as your reference, so it's much faster to create.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is just finding that balance between sort of the efficiency that you need to try and generate to turn these books around, and doing something that feels sort of original and unique. So yeah, trying to kind of bring those things together is pretty important. Yeah, you sort of want there to be as much custom content as possible, because it really shows when something is just duplicated. So yeah, but with these books as well, like it's really important to try and achieve some degree of consistency. It's surprising how off something looks if the character's slightly different. So it's been a real challenge for me, sort of making sure that the character looks exactly the same in each one. I mean, they're obviously not completely the same here, but getting it as close as possible within the time that you've got.
I think it's really cute. Like I'm imagining like a kid like who has multiple of the books will recognize this and see it and go, oh, like that's the same one from the other book.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's looking okay, that one. So I'm just going to flatten him. Lose our reference. Okay, so he's in the scene there, but again, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I'm just going to mask off the areas so he sits nicely into the scene. So one thing that took me years, it's one of those things that I'm sure it's blindingly obvious to most people who use Photoshop, it took me years to figure out, is if you just hold Command on your keyboard and click a layer, it selects the whole layer. I don't know why it took me like 6 years to figure that out, but it's very useful. All right, so I've just selected that bit. Again, I kind of want to see what I'm working on underneath, so I'm just going to drop the opacity on old Hasty Tasty there. And now, again, I'll just start painting into my mask. And that should leave the bits I want left. Oh. Okay, I think that's all that's really needed. So if I bring my opacity back up, oh, yes. Okay, there he is, sitting behind that guy in the background. So we've got one character there. For this book, there's 8 characters that I've got to hide. So yeah, plenty to be going on with.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love it. There was a question from Johanna. I think, there's a question from Johanna. If we can ask this one, this is a sit back and think about it question.
Sure.
Like the question is, what place would you want to make in a Spot the X kind of spread? So yeah, like if you were going to create your own book, any kind of topic in the world, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I mean, the when I first got the brief for this book, it was just the title. It was Where's the Elf Around the World? So you're thinking like, okay, what are the constraints and where I could draw just within Earth? There's like a lot to work
There's a lot there. Yeah, it's a big stage.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I think is because this even though there's crazy robots and wacky stuff going on throughout these scenes, it is sort of ostensibly set within the real world. But I had an idea a little while ago for a book like this that would be playing around with scale a little bit more. So I'm just going to open up Photoshop 2021 here so I can use some of the new features. So I had this idea of a character that had a sort of array. So you would have characters within scenes where all the scale was wrong. So I'd love to do one that was like filled with characters or items, but they were within the confines of a kitchen table or something like that.
Right.
I really love those things where it's like sort of the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of
Yes.
vibe. Yeah.
That
All
would be
right, so I've just saved my file and I'm going to X out of that one. All right, so as I said before, we were going to go on to working on a pattern for the book. So I'll just show you again. If you can see in the little video of me, inside the books, there's these interior patterns that they call end pages. And I'm going to do a little bit of work on the end page for the new book. So it's this very Christmassy kind of vibe that we're going for. I've done a little bit of work on it since the last stream, you may have noticed. And I'll just show you what I'm doing with this new feature in Photoshop. So this is what my file looks like currently, and I'm using a feature that's called Pattern Preview. And basically what it does is you take I don't know if it has to be a square, but you take a artwork that you're working on, and you go to View and go down to Pattern Preview. And what it does is it expands the drawing that you're working on, the canvas that you're working on in Photoshop, almost infinitely all around, and you can design patterns in real time. So if I take an element and move it around, you can see that it moves in real time throughout the extended pattern. And it's a really powerful tool for designing repeating patterns that takes all the guesswork out of it. You can sort of draw on top of things and edit them really quickly. And it's just a really fun way of making designs. So you can see I can just draw within my canvas, doing some crazy squiggles, and it's repeated immediately around. So I can, if I took like a yellow and started doing a design like this, I can see in real time how that's gonna look across the whole pattern. I can even draw outside the canvas and see what that would look like, which is really, really fun. So I'm going for something that's going to be just like visual overload, crazy Christmas everything. And this is the sort of framework that I've started off with. So we're going to start kind of adding a bit of detail into this central pattern. So I've got probably the largest motif is this white swirl that goes through the center of the pattern. And I want to work on that, but it's a little confusing to work on it within the pattern preview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just open a new file, and I'm just going to paste my image in there just so I kind of know what I'm looking at. And I'll just work on this motif by itself, and then I'll bring it into the main file, and we'll see how that looks.
Interesting. So is that to save like some memory space for it, or just so that you can like laser focus in specifically on this without the distraction of, because there was quite a lot going on?
Yeah, there's just a lot going on. So I just want the ability to, not get too lost in the overall pattern and just focus on elements individually. So because I've been doing these Christmas books, I've adapted, you end up sort of making custom brushes for all kinds of things. And one of the custom brushes I've made over the years is a tinsel brush. So I thought this could be a sort of bluey, silvery piece of tinsel. And it'd be nice and easy to paint this tinsel in with my tinsel brush. So I'm going to start. The trick with tinsel being a reflective material is it kind of needs to work in layers. The sections at the back of the tinsel will be colored. So even if this is a silver kind of shape, it needs a kind of blue background to sort of show the reflections or the depth of the material. So I'm just going to start doing one pass in blue, and then I'm going to get a lighter brush, might drop down the spacing on my brush, and then start working on top a little bit to give a little bit of a sense of depth with that tinsel.
Yeah, certainly does. Hey, I've got a couple of questions I might throw in to you. What do you think?
Yeah, of course.
Where do you find inspiration that is enough to fill up an entire scavenger hunt image?
That's very good. It's a very good question. It's it's a bit of a struggle sometimes. A lot of it ends up with me just like sitting down and I find myself sort of talking to my partner and saying, Inga, tell me three funny things about Tokyo, and she'll have to sort of try and come up with something on the spot. A lot of it is just kind of like sitting down, and I'll think of like one or two big ideas. So for the Tokyo one, I really like the idea of having a big robot walking across the road. And then kind of once I've kind of got the context, so I'm doing Shibuya Crossing, I'll draw in the crosswalk, and then I'll just start thinking of like, I don't know, it's sort of like what's the next idea that comes from that. So I'm thinking crosswalk. What's a iconic crosswalk image? It's the Beatles Abbey Road cover. So I put the Beatles into the picture, and then what's an annoying thing that happens at a crosswalk? People drive out too early and get stuck in the middle of a crosswalk when people are crossing over. So I'll put that in, and you kind of just sort of like iterate on those ideas. Like, what's the next thing that comes out of that? But yeah, you do end up drawing some weird things because your brain is kind of just like searching for something. Yeah, it's the most fun part of the process, but it's tricky as well.
Yeah, very cool. So just onto the patterns. So that was a question from Jessica. So thanks for the question, Jessica. And Christine's asking, can you change the size or shape of the pattern section on the fly?
Like so would that be changing the shape of the canvas that you're working on?
I think so, yeah. Because obviously you can change everything that's inside because it's just reflecting what you're drawing. So I guess that leaves us with, can you change the proportions of the canvas, and does it affect the pattern?
That's a really good question. I think this tinsel's ready to go, so let's go back into our main file and we'll give it a go and see what happens.
We're going to find out together.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got my tinsel pattern there, and let's expand that so it sits on top of where it was before. All right, that's looking okay. And let's get rid of that original tinsel there. All right, now we've got our pattern going through it, which is kind of cool. Nice. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save before I do anything adventurous.
Yep. Good idea.
And maybe what I'll do is, let me just see if I can do it now. So if I were to change the shape, okay, so the pattern preview's disappeared, and it's we've cropped it. Now, if I go to view, and go back to pattern preview, go okay. I think the answer is it does work. I mean, it's changed the, we've lost a couple of elements, but it does work. The objects that went off the edge are still consistent and continue. Actually, we have lost some bits of detail that we had before that have been cropped. So you can see this was continuous before. I think the difference is the things that didn't get cropped, like this wreath here, that's a smart object. So even if I crop the file, the smart object retains that information. So that's all totally fine. All that information's been kept. With this series of leaves down the center, that was just a raster file, so that was just pixels. And because of that, when I cropped the main file, it's chopped off that section. So that hasn't been consistent. So I think the answer is yes, you can, but it's
probably want to
I think
avoid
it would be yeah, you probably want to avoid. It's probably easier not to do that.
Yeah.
But it yeah, if you're working with smart objects like a lot of people do for these kind of designs, then you'll be fine, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and obviously if you're drawing like something like the tinsel, which is like kind of you're trying to line it up at the exact right point. As soon as you change that canvas, it's not gonna line up anymore. You're gonna have to redo it as well. So I think it seems to be that you really want to get your probably a square shape from the very beginning and stick to it.
Yeah. You can see that there is a little disconnect with the tinsel that I've put in there. But the amazing thing about this tool is I can just brush right over it and it's fixed. So
yeah,
it's a pretty easy thing to navigate around. Okay, so we've got a tinsel there. I had these leaves here, and you can see I wanted the leaves to go underneath the tinsel, but it's a pretty rough job there where I've masked it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select my tinsel, and I'm going to paint back into that, that mask layer there. And then we should get a really nice, even mask over the top. There we go. So our leaves nicely go underneath our tinsel there. Right, there was another pattern down the bottom here, which was, let's just lose a couple of the top layers so it's a little clearer. Now maybe let's just work on this, this simple green design which was at the bottom. What I might do for this is I might make a couple of holly leaves, keeping it all Christmassy, and then I might just duplicate those in the shape of that pattern to give us a slightly more detailed look. I'm going to take one of my favorite brushes that we use for all of the Flynn and I have done quite a lot of sort of, what do you call them, Flynn? The sort of drawing on the fly.
We called them, we called them interactive drawing, because we would often because we get chat to a lot of people that are here in chat, would jump in and, you know, give us their creative ideas, and then you would somehow draw everything from your mind.
Yeah, they're really fun sessions. So the brush I use on a lot of those is this Kyle T. Webster ink brush. I just really love the textures you get with that one. So I'm doing this pretty roughly, but I think it'll come together in the final pattern. So I might actually just lasso all these. So I'm going to just draw around the shapes that I want colored within these leaves. So we just got to get through this boring coloring section, and then we're on to the fun duplication section. I was saying last time to Flynn on these ones, I love working with this pattern stuff because it feels like you get a lot done in a very short time. The computer does a lot of the work for you with these. So I'm just going to fill that in, and we'll do a little bit of shading to those. Just going to do a couple of highlights. With all these pictures, I'm working in CMYK, the color profile, because it's going to be printed, and the prints work natively in CMYK, which is interesting. The one limitation I find with CMYK is not being able to get quite as intense greens as you can in RGB. It's just a little bit less. So just going to smash that up, but I think that's looking just fine. So I'm going to flatten those layers together, and I think I might just duplicate that and shrink one down a little bit. And I'm just going to sort of match this pattern loosely with my leaves. So it's going to get real small, but that's okay. So this is going to be really hidden in the background. So I'm not too worried about the duplication being obvious because it's going to be quite obscured. This is kind of just that, with these sort of jobs, you kind of need this, oh, some funny things happening there. You kind of just need a lot of this sort of filler to make it look really busy. But that's looking nice.
That's great.
Let's flatten some of those down together. Duplicate another one. I think once we start layering things on top of this, it's going to look really fun.
Super cool. We've got about 10 minutes left, guys, as well. So if you have any questions or want to throw anything in chat, 10 minutes left.
Cool. All right. It's funny doing these books that I find myself, I'm kind of in like 24/7 Christmas mode because I'm sort of like always in the festive mindset with stuff. I mean, it's lucky doing these books that I like Christmas. I know if I was a Grinchy person, this would be a very difficult job.
It would be hard, yeah. You become like a disgruntled retail worker who has to listen to the same, like, I don't know, like Christmas jingle CD on repeat for 8.5 hours a day.
Yeah, well, I've done that too.
Yes.
Yeah. I used to work at Australian Geographic, and they played the best hits of Slim Dusty on repeat for
Wow.
just years, and that was rough. I'm sorry, Slim Dusty is kind of done for me now.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you
I've
lose
got
anybody if you've got to listen to it while you're at work 24/7.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. The artist. Poor Slim.
So we've duplicated those leaves across and made that nice pattern there. So I think if we start layering things back on top, that's going to start looking nice and busy. All right.
Nice.
What I could even do with that, I could even just duplicate that whole thing and rotate it and see what that looks like. Oh, we're losing a little bit there. No, it's okay. I think we're missing we lost a wreath somewhere along the way. We have. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. It's still interesting because the canvas still like behaves like a normal canvas, and it's hard not to. You kind of have to shift your mindset a little bit. Well, I do, to sort of think about like when you change something that obviously some things are going to be cut off, but other things are just being like masked. So it's quite interesting to play with. See you playing with it anyway.
Yeah. So I'm going to take some previously created elements. I'm just going to drop those in, and then we'll see what we can do with those. So I lost, not sure what happened to my wreath, but never fear, we can make another one. So I'm just going to rotate this guy around a few times. And we should end up with a nice big wreath to work with. Oh. Yeah, it is a little odd getting your head around how things keep disappearing outside the canvas and then coming in the side. It takes a little bit of just sort of a mental adjustment. But let's shrink that one down a little bit.
So you're going to be making some Christmas wrapping paper for next year?
Yeah, I better. All right. Now, I think I might paint just a little bit more of this texture in the background there, filling in some of those gaps so that it feels nice and consistent. And I love zooming out on doing this and seeing it sort of your one brush stroke being duplicated across the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's really great for sort of just seeing the pattern come together. Wow, it's looking nice and busy. So I'm imagining one page will be kind of like that. So you'll be able to see a bit of, like, you'll be able to see the duplication, but hopefully you can't see any of the edges where things start to overlap. All right, so let me just pull out some of these baubles. I think they will be fun to work with. So I'm just going to select a couple that are fun. I'm just going to copy and paste those.
So using libraries a lot. So are they all saved as like smart objects, or are they separate Photoshop files? How do you arrange your library to work this quickly?
Yeah. So I've kind of arranged them sort of thematically. So for Christmas things, I've got libraries, and I've got libraries of things like trees or construction objects or stuff like that, and they all come out of libraries as smart objects. So and you can rasterize them, but it's good in that like you kind of save all of your visual information while you're exporting them. One thing I didn't say, which I don't know, it's I guess the sort of Adobe family of programs is so huge that there's always new things that you could be learning that you didn't know about. But I only used the new fonts feature for the first time today. I needed a Japanese font for doing some of those neon signs, and I hadn't actually gone in and just turned one on for the first time. It was very cool.
Nice. So just using a Japanese font, is that what you mean?
Well, I needed to write something in Japanese, so I needed a font that worked with Japanese characters. But finding one that, because it's I mean, it's easy to get fonts from anywhere, but finding something that can be licensed for the book. And it was really cool just being able to turn one on and know that it was all covered by Adobe's license, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm just putting in a couple of these sort of golden swirls here. I might use some way back in the day Photoshop elements and do some beveling and embossing of these layers. I just feel like that was the first thing I ever learned to do in Photoshop, but it's all, the tools haven't changed that tool hasn't changed for a long time. It's all the same stuff.
Bevel and emboss, yeah.
Yeah, classic. All right, just save again. So for anyone new to Photoshop, or that, I mean, I can imagine lots of people had started using Photoshop and never come across this stuff. There's something called layer style, where you can apply different effects to your layer. So the top one is bevel and emboss. Let me just use...
Wow, that's pretty cool. That was very quick. Like,
it was very quick. That wasn't actually the bevel and emboss I was looking for.
Yeah.
I want an inner bevel on these ones. And I want a chisel soft, and let's soften it quite a bit. And it's just going to give a slightly three-dimensional feel to some of these little golden tendril things there. And actually,
suddenly it looks 3D. Suddenly it looks like, it's something off a sleigh or something like that.
Yeah. And I might use outer glow as well. And I'll drop that down to a very small amount. And that'll just give me a little black outline. Sometimes when other objects in the image have outlines, things just feel a bit more consistent once you have that. And what you can do is you can copy that layer style, and then to these ones on top, I can just paste my layer style, and then that's been applied to those top ones as well. And it's actually really fun taking a section that you've already added the layer style to, and then drawing. Sorry, this is sort of Photoshop circa 1995, but I'm still impressed by it.
It's still very cool, yeah.
Yeah, so just drawing some more of those details in like that.
Nice.
So a few more. Okay, I'm slightly overloading this image, but I think that's okay. I think that's okay for this kind of design. It's consciously totally over the top. So let's just rasterize that. Let's rasterize that one. When I say rasterize, I'm just sort of kind of just flattening the image into pixels. Just makes it a little bit easier to work with.
Nice.
Wow.
And just letting you know, we've only got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all good. I'm feeling like that's getting into a pretty good place. So maybe I'll add a couple more bits and pieces to that one. But for the most part, I think we've come up with a fun little design.
It's really awesome.
Thank you. So what we can do with that is, so I'll just save that design. And if I went ahead and, I mean, we can already see what it looks like, but if I flatten the whole image, I actually haven't tried this. So again, just sort of winging it here, hoping it all comes out. If I open a new file, so that was the pattern that I had as a square. And in theory, if I just copy and paste that, it should perfectly tessellate with itself, which it does, which is great.
Nice.
So if this was going to be my end paper at the inside the cover of the book, I can just sort of piece that together, and I've got a nicely tessellating pattern. So that's going to be the inside covers for the book. So yeah,
very cool.
There it is. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I mean, it's incredible. You work so quickly. There's so many different sort of features that you've just used then. But yeah, I love, like, this is the sort of thing that I would see and just think, wow, how did they actually do that? Like, everything looks so three-dimensional. There's so much depth. There's so much going on. I mean, you've just kind of knocked out a big chunk of it in about 20 minutes while you were talking and answering questions. So very impressive work as always. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you very much
for your time hanging out with us. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone in chat. I hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll be back next week with Sophie Brown. You might remember her from last week. We'll be playing with type and some path animation, a little bit of Illustrator, and a little bit of After Effects. So we hope you can join us then. And Bill, thank you once again for joining us on Adobe Live.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thanks, Bill. Bye, everyone.